Hi followers, and welcome to another episode of Pi. In this episode, Cassie and I have ventured to the heart of Brisbane city centre, where murders were committed. Ghostly apparitions are seen in some buildings even to this day. So sit back as we travel around the city and find all these interesting places for you to enjoy. We're at Post Office Square and the GPO is behind us, as you can see. And Cassie's got a bit of information about the GPO.
Okay, so it's at 261 Queen Street in Brisbane City, Queensland, Australia. It's built in 1872, and the reason we've wanted to check this out, even though it's daytime and there's a lot of people around, we just wanted to get a vibe for it. It's because it's been a lot of different sites, so it was an exchange. It was also a female women's prison in the early part of the century, and a lot of people, including all the staff from past, still comment to this day that whether it was the exchange or the post office, two areas they don't like going into is the kitchen and what was formerly the lounge room. That they seem to feel presence in those rooms, and also there's been reports of seeing female images in the building as well, which could be the residue left over from when it was a women's prison. So we're going to go and check it out, take some shots and that for you, just get a feel of it. And we're also going to walk down the alley, which again, even though it's not in the actual building, it could be the residue from when it was a female prison, that a lot of people say that there's, again, things that they see, figures that they see walking down the laneway. There's also apparently the ghost of a Mr. George Bells, who apparently from the balcony at the back of us threw himself off, committed taking his own life in 1935, and it just happened to be on the Halloween night. All right. We're going to go and check it out, and we'll get you some snaps and give you a little bit of information as we go.
So this is the infamous alleyway between the GPO and the building that's next to it, which is supposed to have a few apparitions appear every now and then.
This beautiful little chapel, St. Stephen's Chapel, found in Elizabeth Street in Brisbane City, Queensland, Australia, has fond memories for me as a child going into the city with my grandmother. We would go in there to mainly light candles and say prayers for people that had passed in our family. And whether you're a Catholic or not, it was for me a beautiful memory of just that spirituality of remembering those that had passed. This beautiful little chapel was outgrown. The population in Brisbane at the time of around 1863 had grown to nearly or more than 30% of the population being Catholic. So the bigger church cathedral was built next door. So the little chapel had been used thereafter by the Christian Brothers, who then went on to Wickham Terrace, and also a school, the Sisters of Mercy, who also went on to their own premises, leaving it in 1865. After that, it was pretty much used as a storage. It was used as a choir practice. It was also used for storage for the Catholic Diocese of Brisbane and things like that. It was called for a number of times to be demolished, and thank goodness they didn't. And it was actually deemed a heritage building in 1997 and opened in 1999 after storage as the Pugin Chapel of St. Stephen's, and it's dedicated to Mother Mary, and in particular St. Mary MacKillop, who we know now is an Australian saint canonised this century. The other thing that is just absolutely beautiful about it is the statue dedicated to Mary MacKillop is a beautiful example of wood carving of camphor wood, and you can smell that aroma when you go into the little chapel. And then it's got a very simple statue of Mother Mary, and also the windows are dedicated in stained glass to the story of St. Stephen. I was drawn to that chapel before we left. We were going to go and see lots of other things in Brisbane, which we'll show you, but for some reason I got pulled to go to St. Stephen's, and I think it was not so much the big cathedral, it was the beautiful solitude and simplicity of that little chapel, which is the message that intuitively always comes through for me, the simplicity, not the opulence. This beautiful heritage building, also on the site of the St. Stephen's Cathedral Church, is known as the Mercy Mission building now. So originally it was for the Brothers, and then it became the Sisters of Mercy School right up until 1965. It's also where the beginnings of All Hallows School was founded, and they too moved on to Ann Street in Brisbane City, Queensland. This building now pretty much serves for the Mercy Missions building, and also is an administration building for the Diocese of the Catholic Church of Brisbane. It's a gorgeous old building. The architecture in that, all we can say is thank heavens it's been preserved. The surrounding grounds are beautiful, but quite different to how I remember the buildings when I was a child. The other thing to mention is that although there's no ghost stories that come out of the cathedral, the chapel, or the Mercy Mission building itself, there have been a lot of sightings because it was such a old area, and Elizabeth and Charlotte Street were actually one of the first streets in Brisbane City to be built. So it's more the remnants of ghosts and what people report as apparitions around the grounds and along that street because of the heritage.
Hi everyone, so we're now in Brisbane Arcade in the Queen Street Mall. The Brisbane Arcade actually has two entrances, so from Edward Street and the existing Queen Street Mall. The Brisbane Arcade has a really, really dark history, but some of it I've also always known since I was a child. Growing up in Brisbane, my grandmother used to bring me up to the Tiki tea rooms, which we designed our little tea room a number of years back around the same theme. So there were always tales that she told me about Brisbane Arcade, But in researching, I actually found out some things I didn't even know. So it was built in 1924, and there are stories around the gentleman's family that built it. He came into wealth supposedly from killing a associate of his who was a convict that came out in the early days, and he was robbed. Apparently the guy that built the Brisbane Arcade, or families built the Brisbane Arcade, the wealth came from murdering this Irish associate who had £300 on him, which in those days was an astronomical amount. You have to question where he got the money, and that's what a lot of people did about the family that built this. Where did they get their money? Because they came out not with much finances behind them. He was a butcher by trade, and that was the rumour how he disposed of the body. There were parts of this man found at various points around Kangaroo Point, and he got the nickname the Mad Butcher, and his name was Patrick Main. So it was the Main family that actually built this arcade. So the murder apparently happened in 1848, although this arcade wasn't built till 1924. In between that time, he bought a lot of real estate and became a very wealthy property owner. So that's the story I'd always known of. But
and his butcher shop was at the front where the arcade starts, so that was his butcher shop before the arcade was built.
And then that was pulled down and the arcade was built. So the story, I'd always heard that story about him supposedly murdering, and that's where the family got the money from. I'd always heard that even when I was a child and my grandmother would bring me here, that shopkeepers, there used to be a ballet costume shop, there's jewellers, there's still jewellers here, lots of things. Even the ladies that ran the Tiki Tea Room back in the day used to talk about seeing shadows and identities and things like that. But what I also found out investigating, and we've got some footage that we'll show you, because you can imagine we're here in the daytime, there's lots of people around. So we've kind of snuck down to what we think still is the number 5 suite, which back in 1947 was a accountancy firm, and a young woman called Bronnia Armstrong worked for this firm, and her, let's call superior, was a man called Reginald Wingfield Spence Brown, 49. What happened was, she was found by a person that worked next door, which was a nurse called Lorna Major, and she found her in the morning brutally murdered, sexually assaulted, brutally murdered, and Reginald Wingfield Spence Brown was arrested. But in between the night of him leaving, when they think she was murdered, and his family, and in the morning, he did have scratches and bruises and that on him, and he explained it away as someone had mugged him on the way home. So as you can imagine, that didn't add up. So he went to prison. There's a book written by his ancestors who still to this day say he didn't do it. We don't know. We're not saying he did or didn't, but that was what was found. So a lot of people say Bronnia Armstrong's ghost still walks around, and there's been people say they've heard screams at different times and things like that. There's also a millinery shop. It was a millinery shop when I would come here as a child. It's still a millinery shop. I don't think it's the same business, but it's still a millinery shop. And apparently there was a lady who passed away or was attached to that shop. I presume she was a milliner, and supposedly a lot of people, day and night, have seen a woman in black with extremely gorgeous bonnet walking in particular around the top here. So you can see in the video, even in the background, there's like a walkway veranda.
I'll go around, you can keep talking.
and apparently she's seen roaming around at different times. So very interesting. So also, when you come to these places, if you're interested in ghost theories and stories and legends and things like that, especially if you're intuitive, just come and get a feel for it, and just let your own intuition kind of guide you as to what may be, myth and what does feel right. I have to admit, the one with Bronya down in that very tucked away corner, I have to admit, even though she passed in the office, for some reason when I was standing there doing a bit of filming of it, I felt something there on the stairs. So it could have been the lady with the bonnet, or I didn't see anything, but that's what I felt. So if you are intuitive, just let your intuition guide you to that as well. But lots of stories attached to this arcade, lots of history as far as, very dark attachments as far as incidents that happen. So it's very, very interesting. So come and check it out as well.
The next building we explored on our visit to Brisbane was the Pancake Manor in 18 Charlotte Street, Brisbane City, Queensland, Australia. So we actually used to hang out here in the 80s, and it was a great meeting place and just something a bit different in Brisbane at the time. So the early days it is listed as St Luke's Anglican Church, built in 1904, and then it became the missionary centre for that church. It also was used for the soldiers in the World Wars, and it was actually known also underneath the building as the Anzac Club. And it, interesting enough, also was the newspaper's Boys Club, and where the Brisbane newspaper boys would collate all their deliveries for around the city from there as well. So it was sold and converted as a Pancake Manor in 1979, and to this day it is still a restaurant, and a very popular restaurant in Brisbane City. There's some interesting stories attached to the Pancake Manor Old Church building. So the bell tower on numerous occasions has had people report hearing footsteps go up and down when no one's there. There's been shadows reported by staff and visitors. Also crockery being heard in that area underneath the church, which was the old Anzac Club and Boys Club, which for the restaurant since 79's become a storage area, and managers there of a night would hear crockery down there being smashed. They would not get down till the morning to check it out, and to their surprise, when they would go and check it in the morning, there was no crockery, nothing was smashed, everything was still in place. People have heard boys' voices and chatter and laughter, and we've actually had some first-hand encounters reported to us by a lady in particular that I worked with in recent years, who used to work there as like a assistant chef, like a sous chef, and she said especially that downstairs storage area was somewhere where the staff really didn't like to go. They always felt like someone was looking over their shoulder, or when they went down there it felt like someone was there. So there's a lot of residue energy left over in the building, especially with its history being a church, and then the soldiers, and then the two clubs, the Anzac Club and the Newspaper Boys Club. When we visited it on this trip, we weren't able to kind of get as much inside footage that we wanted, because it was during the day, it was extremely busy. I tried to sneak and get a picture of the at least the stairwell and the archway leading down to that storage room, but it was really hard for me to kind of sneak across and try and get that without someone, and rightly so, pulling me up and saying, what are you doing? We did ask a couple of staff if they'd had any experiences, and to be honest, we think they were fairly young, and we think we kind of scared them a little bit. So I was a little bit concerned that I'd brought ghosts up and that maybe they might be a bit scared working there now. But it was all in all very reminiscent for us because, as I say, we used to venture there in the 80s. It was a very new place in Brisbane and we loved going there. Beautiful to see that it's still a restaurant and well looked after, and just inside is just beautiful. So again, if you're in Brisbane, make sure you check it out. It is the Pancake Manor in the old church in 18 Charlotte Street.